Chapter 1011. The peas kept springing onto Ethan's face. Irritated, he threw the pod in his hand into the basket. "I'm out, Madam Wendy." "Calm down, young man. I know you've never done such chores at home because you came from a rich family. But think about it, your eyes can't recover in 2 or 3 days. You have to get used to the life of a visually impaired person." Ethan was stunned at the idea that Wendy was training him. Olivia had mentioned something similar. However, he didn't pay much heed to it because he was immersed in the ecstasy of reuniting with Olivia. He became serious upon Wendy's reminder. "Madam Wendy, how long will it take for my eyes to recover?" "I can't say that for sure. The fastest would be 3 months, but it could take up to a year and a half. You better go to the hospital after the remaining poison in your body is removed. It is not easy to treat the eyes. In short, they won't recover that quickly." His heart sank to the pit of his stomach. Before this, he was grateful that he was saved. Now that Olivia was the only person he could think of, he wondered how a visually impaired person like him could stand a chance against her admirers. Willow, who noticed his anxiety, patted the back of his hand lightly. She was comforting him. Her little hand seemed to hold some mysterious energy that was able to placate his nervousness. Ethan put that matter at the back of his head and sat down to keep peeling the peas. Willow took out a flute, which Olivia had made, and blew it on the small bridge. It was Celestial Castle, a wondrous piece that contained beautiful meanings. The moonlight bestowed a silver sheen to the peaceful night as though purifying all beings. At the same time, Ethan's emotions slowly morphed into tranquility. He focused on peeling the peas out of the pods while feeling his surroundings. Along with the melodic song, the singing of the insects, the sound of birds flapping their wings, and the cooing of the owls on the branches harmonized. They filled Ethan's quiet and void world to the brim. Wendy was right. All he kept thinking about was Olivia, and so he had neglected his surroundings. By the time he finished peeling that basket of peas, it was 9:30 p.m. The villagers didn't spend their time outside at night. According to their routine, they should be sleeping by now. Ethan felt quite tired, too. Willow walked up to him to hold his hand, wanting to take him to his room. The juice was staining his hands since he had just peeled the peas. "Where can I wash my hands, Willow?" She dragged him along the way while he tried to distinguish the direction. They entered the cottage, and she pulled him to the yard, where a lot of flowers and greenery were planted. A flowery scent whirled at the tip of his nose. He guessed that it was the house Olivia was staying in. Willow turned the water tap, and clean water flowed out of it. The meticulous little girl handed him a bar of soap, too. Right then, he suddenly heard Olivia's voice. "Ouch, that hurts." He stopped washing his hands as anger was flaring in him. He asked on purpose, "What's that sound?" Willow shook her head, indicating that she didn't have a clue. His heart throbbed in pain. "Is someone bullying your mother? Take me to her." She wanted to explain to him that that wasn't it, but she couldn't speak. She didn't know how to tell him that. But she couldn't do anything to placate his anxiety, so he led him upstairs. The noise didn't stop. Olivia sounded like she was in pain. "It hurts. Hold on." Every word Ethan heard hurt him deeply. He thought, Liv, what are you doing?" Right now, his body was trembling uncontrollably. It was either due to anger or fear. They reached the door, and Willow opened it. Chapter 1012. The door opened. Ethan couldn't find the exact word to describe his feelings. He was having a rush of blood to the head. Since he couldn't see, he kept imagining Olivia and Colin spending an intimate moment together. A few years ago, Colin did take advantage of the drug to do something similar to her. Now that she was divorced, it was possible for her to develop a relationship with Colin. Even if Ethan found out about it, what could he do about it? At that moment, he felt grateful for the fact that he couldn't witness such a heartbreaking scene with his own eyes. A pleasant smell filled the room. It wasn't a fragrance but more like the smell of shampoo or body shampoo. Olivia sounded cold. "What are you doing here?" Ethan was a little flustered. Exactly. What was he doing over there? Trying to catch a wife in an affair. He reined in the sturdy motions in him, forcing himself to sound as normal as possible. I heard you were hurting. I thought something happened to you, so I wanted to check on you. Before Olivia could explain, he sneered. Mr. Miller, do you usually worry about the other party as long as she's a woman? Don't you know what it means when a woman is screaming in their room? Or are you pretending not to know? She's my doctor. This is about my life and death. What if something happened to her? Who's going to treat me? Isn't it normal for me to care about her? As for you, why are you so restless whenever I do something? You know what you've done. Olivia waved her hand, signaling Colin to stop arguing further. Obviously, she didn't want a dispute to break out between the men. It would make Ethan suspect her instead. She looked at Ethan, whose eyes were covered. Even a stray dog could step on him if it wanted to. Who knew the mighty man would fall into such a state? She let out a silent sigh. I'm fine. My brother was brushing my hair. After the chemotherapy, it took a long time for her hair to grow. Similar to every other woman out there, Olivia puts a lot of importance on beauty care. She was worried that her hair wouldn't grow well. Thus, Colin specially made a shampoo for her and learned how to massage. The massage was hurtful, but it was useful. Her hair was smooth and sleek. It grew out better than before. Meanwhile, Ethan released his tightened fists. Judging from how she addressed Colin, Ethan reckoned that Colin didn't have it his way yet. Sorry for disturbing you. Ethan fumbled about before holding the railing to walk down the stairs. Willow held his free hand and left together. Once they were left alone, Colin played with the comb in his hand. Olivia, are you planning to return to his side? She shook his head. Colin, I don't wanna lie to you. I can't bring myself to watch him dead. Have you forgotten what he did to you? I never forget about them for a day. I am doing this because of selfish reasons. It's because I don't want my children to lose a father. Even though they're with me, at least their father is still alive. If he's dead, what is Connor going to do? Connor is with him right now. He asked, do you still love him? If I still love him, would I rack my brain to escape from him and hide from him for years? Only then did Colin's complexion turn better. Olivia, I'm simply worried that you'll make the same mistake. That guy is a devil. You mustn't be deceived by his pitiful state now. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Thank you. You gave me a massage as soon as you got here. Let's call it a day. He still had something to say, but he ended up saying, okay. Rest up. He left the room with a smile, but his expression turned cold as soon as he left the room. His cold gaze watched in Ethan's direction. Chapter 1013. Olivia, who had washed her hair, rested against the window to gaze at the full moon. She lied to Colin. It had been 3 years and 6 months. She thought that she had gotten over Ethan. However, she became frantic and helpless when she learned that he was going to die due to poison. She rushed to his side without hesitation. Her kids were one of the reasons for it, but most importantly, she didn't want him to die. By right, Olivia shouldn't have had such emotions. It seemed like she needed to send him off as soon as he recovered. Otherwise, the longer he stayed, the more difficult it would be for her. She could hear the sound of the flute blowing from afar. Willow was blowing it in Ethan's room. Willow liked Ethan so much, but how could Olivia tell the little girl that Ethan wasn't his biological father? If Ethan found out that Willow's father was another man, would he hurt her? Olivia wasn't confident about her judgment toward Ethan because he could have changed throughout the past 3 years. Willow stopped blowing after playing 3 pieces. She patted Ethan's hand and left him on the bed. She hoped he could get some early rest. He caressed her head. Good girl. Your father must be proud of you. She smiled faintly. Suddenly, a soft sensation touched his cheek. Realizing that it was a peck from Willow, he was over the moon. Willow, do you like me? She rang her bell happily in response. He replied joyfully, I do, too. They were comfortable with their distinct interaction now. Willow turned into a happy bunny upon learning that her father liked her, too. She took off the bead necklace to wear it around his wrist. It was made of a 5-colored string. Is this for me? She rang her bells again. Thank you. He touched the special beads. That was a gift from his daughter. I will take good care of it. The happy girl left his room to return to Olivia's side. Olivia patted on the place beside her, and Willow nestled into her arms like a kitten. Willow wrote the word, "Daddy," on Olivia's palm. For the first time in forever, Olivia felt it difficult to face those green eyes. How was she supposed to tell Willow that she didn't share the same father as her elder siblings? Not to mention how happy Willow was. That would rain on her parade. Olivia, who had always loved her kids, didn't tell Willow the truth. "Do you like him?" Willow nodded with bright eyes. Olivia couldn't bring herself to let Willow down as she said, "But we have to keep this a secret. Otherwise, he'll lock me up." Willow couldn't follow because Ethan appeared gentle to her. Why would someone like him hurt Olivia? Still, Willow believed that Olivia wouldn't lie to her. Willow nodded obediently. "Good girl. If you like him, spend more time with him while you can." Zach and Alicia reached school age, and they were studying abroad. Now, Olivia only had Willow by her side. Besides, Willow couldn't speak. Hence, the more reason for Olivia to pamper her with love. They fell asleep in each other's arms. On that silent night, the miserable Cyril was still collecting manures in the rear house. He still needed to go to the vegetable farm first thing in the morning tomorrow alongside Wendy. Ethan had yet to recover fully, so he slept quite early. The silence went on until he suddenly heard Olivia's voice. He woke up. "Liv." He heard it coming from beyond the door. He hurried to the door. "Liv, is that you?" Chapter 1014. The noise could be heard from afar. Olivia seemed to be chasing after someone. Ethan hurried down the stairs while holding the railing. He chased in the direction of the source of the noise. He fell several times in the meantime but still got back on his feet and continued his pursuit as though it didn't hurt. The noise was not far away from him, seemingly luring him somewhere. Worrying about Olivia's safety, Ethan shouted her name, "Liv. Where are you? Are you all right?" Olivia woke up from her dream. She thought she heard Ethan calling her name. Could it be a dream again? She wondered. Uneasiness shrouded her for some reason. Dismissing the thought of going back to bed, she propped herself up. She figured that checking out the situation could put her mind at rest. Olivia got out of bed after covering the bedsheet over Willow. She headed downstairs and soon noticed the door to Ethan's room was left ajar. She wondered, why did he leave the door open at this late hour? She hurried to his room, where only the dim lamplight was left turned on. The blanket was left untidied, and there was no sign of Ethan. "Mr. Miller," she called but received zero responses. The uneasiness in her went through the roof. Considering that Ethan was visually impaired, Olivia assumed that he wouldn't wander around mindlessly. She had clearly warned him about the poisonous beings in the area. Where could he be? Olivia checked downstairs but in vain. There were no phones in the village, let alone security cameras. She heard some noise coming from the rear house. It was Cyril. "What are you doing not guarding Ethan?" she interrogated. She didn't even notice her voice was trembling. "Madam Wendy made me do some chores. It's so late. Mr. Miller should be sleeping." Olivia was on the edge of going insane. Cyril had always been this stiff. Back then, Olivia even thought of marrying Mona to him. Yet, he failed to make Mona fall for him, although they spent most of their time together every day. Frustrated, Olivia stomped on her foot. "No wonder you're single. Miss, what's wrong? Did something happen? Mr. Miller is missing." Cyril shook his head. "No way. He can't see. Where could he possibly go? How am I supposed to know that? Find him." She was going mad. Just what made Ethan leave the house? Most importantly, where did he go? Was he aware of what kind of place this was? The northern cliff was so dangerous that it would take one fall to send one to heaven. There was a snake's den in the southern area. Not even the locals dared to come close to it. Poisonous beings were everywhere in the eastern and western areas as well. She huffed in her head. Does he not know that he's visually impaired? Why can't he just stay put? Olivia ran and searched for Ethan for a long time, but she still couldn't find him. She wondered, how could he run so fast? Is he the reincarnation of Usain Bolt? The route ahead of them was split into two. Anxious, Cyril asked, "Where should we go?" While she couldn't make up her mind on which way to choose, she saw a shoe in the southern direction. "What's that?" It's Mr. Miller's shoe. It was a gravel road. Olivia shone a torch to the ground to realize that there wasn't only a slipper. She saw a few drops of blood. She bet that Ethan had fallen here and left the place without staying for a long time. Mr. Miller must have gone there. Miss, where does this route lead to? Cyril had yet to realize the impending danger. After all, he saw Ethan as a mature and collected man. Meanwhile, the cold breeze added the weight of dread weighing on her heart. She stared at the endless route and responded, the snake's den. Chapter 1015. Cyril felt a chill down his spine. He suddenly recalled something that Wendy told him when they were talking. There were 48 species of snakes discovered in this region, of which over 30 of them were venomous. Their bites were deadly, and there were no antidotes available. Ethan's eyes were blinded. What would happen if he fell over? Olivia and Cyril didn't dare to wait around anymore. They quickly rushed ahead. Mr. Miller, please stop. Cyril yelled at the top of his lungs. The forest was quiet. Ethan should be able to hear his voice. After walking a short distance, they noticed one of Ethan's slippers. There were also the occasional drops of blood. Olivia was puzzled. Why would he run ahead with such reckless disregard despite falling over repeatedly? What could be leading him on? Didn't he know it was very dangerous to do so? Apparently, he didn't care. He didn't slow down despite the danger. What he was pursuing seemed more important to him than his life. Let's go. Willow was sound asleep when something nudged her arm suddenly. She rubbed her eyes drowsily. The deer that she had been playing with had come into her room. A dove flew in, perched on her bed, and started chirping at her. She turned around and saw that Olivia was missing. Something was wrong. Willow jumped out of bed and ran off with the deer. Ethan gradually slowed down. He could hear Cyril calling for him from a distance, but Olivia's voice was very close. It sounded like she was in trouble. He could hear her calling for help. Help, help me, Liv, Ethan called out, but there was no response. Other than people's voices, he could also hear the sound of snakes hissing. Judging by the frequency of it, there were quite a lot of snakes in the vicinity. There was a man standing a short distance away from him. It was Colin. He gazed at Ethan, who had fallen over several times in contempt. The hatred in his eyes was practically oozing out. Ethan should have died long ago. This was the perfect chance to end his life. Colin didn't speak. He dropped the phone that was playing Olivia's voice down. There was a snake pit there with thousands of snakes in it. It looked very horrifying. Where are you, Mr. Miller? Cyril's voice could be heard coming from a distance from time to time. The phone in the snake pit was also playing Olivia's voice. Help, help me, where are you, Liv? Colin said coldly, she's right in front of you. Don't you claim to love her? I would like to see you prove that. Who are you? What do you have against me? Why did you lure me here? I don't really have anything against you. I'm just someone who couldn't stand how you do things. Your lover is right in front of you, waiting for you to save her. What? Are you scared? Then stop pretending that you love her. It is absolutely revolting. Although Ethan couldn't see, he could guess what was going on with the sounds of hissing and the rotting smell. There wasn't any fear on his face. He asked calmly, why do I have to prove my love to you? Who are you to live? Cyril's voice was getting closer. Colin was getting anxious. He didn't expect them to get there so quickly. Do you dare to do it or not? If not, let me give you a hand. There wasn't enough time. He had to take matters into his own hands. Colin was about to push Ethan into the pit. Then, Ethan turned toward him and smiled eerily. But I'm more than happy to prove it to you right now. Before Colin could figure out what he meant, Ethan jumped into the pit. Olivia's heart-wrenching voice echoed. No. Chapter 1016. Olivia had been running in the forest. She grew more uneasy the closer she got to the snake pit. A healthy man would have trouble getting out of a place like that, let alone a blind man like Ethan. If he fell into the pit, he would die of 1,000 snake bites. That was an image too horrifying for her to imagine. A chilling breeze blew toward her, carrying the rotting smell from the snake pit. Olivia shivered uncontrollably. She was like a hunter whose sole purpose was to push ahead. She couldn't hear anything else. The howling winds made her panic. She fell to the ground due to her anxiety. Cyril quickly helped her up. "Are you okay?" He noticed that she was shivering terribly. "Quick, the snake pit is just ahead." Olivia got up while ignoring the pain in her knee and started to run recklessly toward the snake pit. At that moment, she couldn't feel any pain. There was only one thought in her head: to save Ethan. She had to save him. He had to live. As she exhausted her strength getting to the snake pit, all she saw was Ethan jumping into the snake pit resolutely. Olivia could hear her own voice crying out for help in the snake pit. So, that was the reason Ethan was running. That was why he jumped into the pit. She finally understood, but it was too late. "No," Olivia yelled, but she was too late to do anything. She could only watch as Ethan disappeared into the pit. He was blind, not dumb. He had to have sensed what was before him, but he still jumped. He didn't even think about the consequences. Olivia completely lost her cool. She wanted to jump in after him. Colin grabbed her just in time and held on to her with all his might. He whispered coldly in her ear, "It's too late. It's all over now." At that moment, Olivia realized that Colin had never changed. Back then, he intentionally drank the drug on the cruise ship. He pretended to be an innocent and pure young man to stay by her side. Then, he lied in order to have her get an abortion. Olivia tried to see past all those things because he saved her life. But he never changed. He only ever cared about her and never cared if the people around her lived or died. As long as he could achieve his goal, he didn't care what methods he had to resort to. In essence, he was the same type of person as Leia. Olivia felt as if she had been stabbed in the chest. Tears flowed down her face as she looked at Ethan, who was surrounded by snakes in the pit. Ethan Miller. That was the man that she had loved with everything she had. Then, she hated him with every fiber of her being. But he was also the man she tried her best to save. It was also this man who jumped into the pit under the moonlight with reckless disregard for himself. It was a very horrible way to die. A living human would become nothing but bones in less than 30 minutes if so many snakes attacked him. Mr. Miller. Cyril was stunned by what he saw. His leg wasn't fully recovered yet. So, he lagged behind Olivia. He had never seen so many snakes in his life, nor had he seen a person surrounded by so many snakes. When he snapped back to reality, he instinctively moved toward the pit. "Mr. Miller, hold on." Ethan's men were all incredibly brave. Even if it was just a corpse, he had to get Ethan out of there. He couldn't just leave Ethan to the snakes. A towering man like him was running toward the pit with tears in his eyes. Cyril wasn't as composed as Brent or as lively as Kelvin. He was always a very honest man. He couldn't get it through his mind why things were the way they were. He had just left Ethan for a short while. "Don't come over," Ethan yelled from within the snake pit. He sensed what Cyril was trying to do. So, he gave Cyril one final command. "Stop right there. Don't take another step forward." Chapter 1017. "Mr. Miller, I can't just stand by and do nothing. Don't come here. It's an order. Stay where you are." Cyril tilted his head upward to stop his tears from flowing. He had witnessed a lot of his friends die on the battlefield before. He wasn't afraid of dying. Mona's death traumatized him. His leg was supposed to be crippled, but he gave everything he got during rehabilitation. He wanted to stand by Ethan's side and protect him. He didn't want what happened to Mona ever to happen again. Still, a horrible thing had happened. He felt as helpless as the night Mona died. While Colin was distracted, Olivia took the chance to throw him over her shoulder and slammed him into the ground. She ran past Cyril and went straight for the pit. She had completely left logic and the thought of consequences behind. The only thing she cared about was the dashing general who saved her from the ocean, the ex-husband who leapt in front of her during a car accident and blocked all the glass shards, and the man who jumped into a pit without regard for himself for a recorded voice. He still owed her so much. He couldn't die yet. Colin knew he had utterly lost the instant Olivia rushed toward the pit. He didn't expect Olivia to care for Ethan even after so many years. He lay on the ground as he watched Olivia dash toward Ethan recklessly. He understood she would never pick him, even if he waited another decade. "Olivia, I've done so much for you. Why won't you look at me?" Colin thought. When he closed his eyes, he could still see the young lady who reached out to him when he jumped down from the plum tree. Her eyes were completely on him back then. Olivia didn't have any snake repellent powder on her. If she jumped into the pit, she would surely die. It was her choice. No one could stop her. Suddenly, the sound of a flute could be heard, followed by the giant red snake appearing in the pit. The snakes surrounding Ethan dispersed. The giant red snake cleared the path for Olivia. No other snake dared to approach her. The snake pit was a huge basin with slopes on all sides. Olivia ran toward Ethan, who had no idea what was going on. He heard a gust of wind and felt someone hugging him. She was like a woman diving into the flames to be with her lover. She rushed to his side while ignoring everyone else. Olivia's heart was still pounding. Are you okay? If Ethan could see, he would have seen Olivia looking at him anxiously with tears streaking down her face. I'm fine. Why are you here, Vanessa? Fine. Olivia looked at his torso in disbelief. He had been surrounded by snakes. As an intruder into their space, there was no reason the snakes would leave him. Why was that? Then, she noticed a bracelet on his arm. It belonged to Willow. So, it was Willow who saved him. Relief washed over her. He was still alive. That was great. Ethan grabbed the phone. Olivia's voice was still playing. I'm sorry. I thought I had found my ex-wife. That's why. Olivia gave him a resounding slap on his face. Ethan was stunned by the slap. Then, he felt Olivia wrap her arms around his neck. Then, some warm liquid dripped on his neck. You bastard, do you want to kill yourself? Liv, is that you? Chapter 1018. Ethan asked like he was afraid Olivia would dissolve like a dream if he raised his voice. Olivia punched him in the chest and said, You bastard, do you even know where this is? Ethan snapped out of his shock and grabbed Olivia's hand. Liv, there are a lot of snakes here. Get away, quickly. Although Cyril didn't understand why he would call out Olivia's name while another person was in his arms, he still reminded Ethan of his situation. Mr. Miller, the snakes have been driven away. You're safe now. Willow was riding on the deer with the flute in her hand. She looked like a fairy in the woods under the moonlight. She was playing a beautiful tune, too. When Willow saw Olivia crying in Ethan's arms, she felt some warmth in her heart. Her mother still had feelings for her father. She turned to look at Colin, who didn't stay to witness the love between the two lovebirds. He left without looking back. Ethan smiled despite being slapped. He wrapped his arms around Olivia. He no longer had to hide his emotions. He had a bright smile on his face like a child. Liv, I've found you at last. So, you've been by my side all along. He reached out and caressed Olivia's face, wiping her tears away. Don't cry. I'm fine. I'm really unharmed. Olivia had also calmed down. She pushed Ethan away and wiped the tears off her face roughly. Go back to bed if you're not dead. She had just experienced an emotional roller coaster. There wasn't a moment of rest for her. She felt despair and hope several times. After everything was over, her emotions were back to normal. Her rationality returned to her. As she walked in front, Cyril also realized who she was. He bowed his head slightly and said, It's nice to see you again, Mrs. Miller. Olivia stopped before him and said, You're still as dumb as ever. Cyril scratched his head. Olivia used to be very friendly. She would never ridicule anyone or curse him to be single forever. Yeah. Olivia was speechless when she saw Cyril standing in place and staring at him in a daze. Take him back. Olivia didn't care anymore. She decided to let them do as they pleased. Just as she was walking away, Cyril called out, Mr. Miller's knee is injured, Mrs. Miller. He's bleeding a lot. Why had Cyril become as jumpy as Kelvin? Ethan withdrew the hand that was pinching Cyril when Olivia wasn't looking. Cyril winced in pain. He thought about how hard his job was. He wasn't as quick-witted as Brent. He couldn't tell what Ethan wanted just with a glance. Or else, he wouldn't have come to his senses after Ethan pinched him. As expected, Olivia stopped in her tracks and turned around. Get him out of the pit first. It's dangerous here. We need to get away. Understood. Cyril did as she said. He put Ethan on his back and left quickly. He even walked faster than Olivia. Willow, who was riding the deer, sighed in relief when she saw that. Luckily, she made it in time. Olivia didn't say anything else. Everything could wait until they were back to safety. She looked at where she threw Colin to the ground. He wasn't there anymore. Then, she asked Cyril to bring Ethan to the spring while she went to prepare some medicinal herbs. Colin's room was right below hers. She knocked on the door, but there wasn't any response. The candle was lit. She pushed open the door, but there wasn't anyone there in the room. He had left again. Olivia sighed in resignation. She really saw Colin as a younger brother. She was really grateful for all he had done for her and was trying her best to drag him out of the shadows. But it had been many years. Colin was like a snake hidden in a cave, unwilling to step into the light. She could only hope he would meet a woman who could do that for him. That woman would not be her. Olivia exited the room and closed the door lightly. Chapter 1019. Willow was standing behind her outside the door. Olivia patted her on the head and said, "Good job, dear. I'll tend to his wounds. You should get some rest. You must be tired." Willow nodded. Olivia fell silent as she watched Willow leave. She didn't know what Ethan might try to do if he found out Willow wasn't his daughter. Ethan's cold and emotionless face from the past appeared in her mind. He had told her that he wouldn't tolerate her betrayal. Even if he forgave her for doing it with Logan, it didn't mean he would tolerate the child she had with another man. Willow's existence would be like a thorn in his side that he could never forget. When Olivia got to the spring, Ethan was already naked in the water. After realizing that Vanessa was Olivia, Cyril became very sensible. He took the chance to sneak away from the cave and left them alone. Ethan licked his lips. He had a lot of things he wanted to tell Olivia. He could only keep those things to himself before he realized who she truly was. He finally had the chance to tell her. "Liv, Olivia put her finger on his lips and said, "I don't want to hear anything. As you know, I changed my identity and hid because I wanted to be away from you. I hope you won't disrupt the status quo." With one sentence, she silenced everything he wanted to say. Ethan said bitterly, "What status quo is this?" Olivia replied coldly, "I'm the doctor. You're the patient. That's all." She casually wiped out all the history they had together. "As for what happened just now, I apologize for Colin. The good thing is, you're unharmed. I saved your life, so we're square on this. So, Colin is more important to you than me," Ethan blurted out. Realization struck Olivia as she looked at Ethan abruptly. "You knew he was Colin. If he had guessed that, it would mean he knew her true identity, too. Why would he pretend not to know her? Perhaps he had realized that Colin was setting him up, and he was just playing along." Ethan understood what she was thinking about. He quickly explained, "That's not it. He called you his sister. Jack wouldn't do that. You look healthy, which means you've been cured. Most importantly, only he could do something like that." Olivia didn't believe him at all. As long as the seed of doubt had taken root, it would only get stronger over time. "Ethan, was that all just a show to get me to pity you? Did you know who I was? Was that why you asked Brent and the others to leave?" Ethan was shocked, but he managed to keep a straight face. He couldn't afford to be exposed. He felt fortunate that his eyes were still covered up. It was harder to discern his emotions like that. "Liv, you think too highly of me. I'm not a god. I can't foresee the future, nor do I have the power to manipulate Colin to lure me to the snake pit. There were so many snakes there. Do you think I would gamble with my life?" Olivia stared at him for a while. He was right. Even if he had Willow's bracelet, he wouldn't know it could repel snakes and other creepy crawlies since Willow couldn't talk. In that situation, jumping into the pit would mean certain death. No matter how cunning he was, Ethan would never do something like that. Olivia finally let her guard down. She forgot that Ethan was a complete maniac. Chapter 1020. Olivia cleaned him again. After being soaked in the medicinal water, his wounds stopped bleeding. She then used some iodophor on him to disinfect the wounds. His skin, which used to be smooth and flawless, was riddled with scars. Ethan was afraid that he might anger Olivia, so he fell silent. If she found out that everything was part of his plan, Olivia would definitely run from him again. He risked his life for the truth. He knew he had won the moment Olivia rushed into danger toward him. Olivia still loved him, but their past had still created a rift between them. Ethan was determined to mend their relationship, even if the rift was as deep as the deepest part of the ocean. The process would take time. He couldn't rush things. Olivia was still reeling from the shock. This man chased after a recording. If not for Willow's bracelet, he would be dead. She didn't want to talk to Ethan about the past. I told you not to run off on your own. There's a cliff in the north and a snake pit in the south. There is also the miasma and all sorts of venomous creatures to the east and west. Only the village is safe. Now that I know you're alive and well, I won't do it again. His submissive display reminded Olivia of something Brent had said. Ethan was injured because he couldn't bring himself to harm a woman who looked like her. He made the same mistake again. Ethan, Olivia called out abruptly. I'm here, Liv. I've learned a lot of skills these past years. I can take care of myself. I've changed my name, and no one knows I'm still alive. You don't have to worry about me anymore. You might not be so lucky next time. His enemies knew of his weakness. They would definitely pull the same trick again. She still wanted him to be well despite what happened between them. Understood. They stopped talking as Olivia continued to dress his wounds. Both of them had their own considerations. Olivia didn't want him to ask about Willow, while Ethan didn't want her to run away from him. They were walking on eggshells but also on guard against each other. After she dressed his wounds, Olivia took off her mask. Since he already knew her identity, there was no point for her to wear it anymore. Rest here tonight. It would be easier to treat the poison tomorrow. Ethan quickly grabbed her sleeve. For a second, he looked like a puppy that was about to be abandoned. What about you? Are you going away? Olivia sighed. I'm not. After the entire ordeal, she was tired. She had stayed up for the past few nights to brew the medication for him. She wanted to sleep, too. Liv, I can't see. Can you sleep next to me? I don't feel safe otherwise. You're very needy, aren't you? Ethan feigned weakness. Please, I am a patient, after all. All right, go to sleep. I'll be here. They were just at the snake pit. Ethan was cleaned. Olivia wanted to wash up, too. She secured her hair with a hairpin. She went into the spring without any reserve since Ethan was blind. The temperature was perfect, and it was very comfortable. She completely relaxed after making sure Ethan was unharmed. After a while, she drifted off by the spring. Olivia completely relaxed after the crisis was over. Ethan didn't hear her coming out of the spring. He called out to her, but she didn't respond. Ethan became anxious. He stumbled toward the spring in a hurry. Liv,